دين الأنبياء إنه الإسلام نور وضياء قسما بالله رب العالمين ما ارتضينا غير دين الله دين فهو دين الحق دين الأنبياء إنه الإسلام نور وضياء
هذا الدر وهذه الكلم بمديح الهادي تنتظم ضاءت بالمختار الظلم وحلا في مولده النغم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to Finding Me today in the ITV networks with a dynamic young guest. Ibrahim Mphutlane wa Bofelo is, I think, perhaps an image or an icon of what we have in South Africa, the treasures that reside within us and that we have not realized the potential, that it is untapped, and whom we do not have access to. But it is a privilege to have this wonderful guest with me today. Ibrahim is an author, he is a poet, an activist, and also teaches at the Workers' College. So with that, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome, Ibrahim. Thank you for being here.
Walaikum salam.
You know, it's really wonderful to encounter personalities such as yourself and to realize that we have this tremendous treasure within us in South Africa. The sad part, of course, is that it's untapped and that many of us do not know of the work that you do, the contributions that you are making, and of course the sacrifices that you have put together in terms of your life and the past and what you see in terms of a future for South Africa. So let's start with perhaps your most amazing journey, and I think that would be as somebody who looks towards the youth as a potential to change society. You were part of the MYM, the Muslim Youth Movement, and you also look at the youth as a potential to develop a better South Africa, a better humanity. Where does all this come from?
Oh, well, I think firstly, as a young person growing in South Africa, you experience in the South African context lack of opportunity, access to opportunities, and so on. But you also find different creative and innovative ways through which young people exercising their agency are able to navigate their way around the social, political, cultural issues facing them, whether it is through literature, through arts, through sports, through social activism, community activism, and participation in religious institutions. Young people have been able to make contributions. Unfortunately, there is a narrative of a lost generation which is meant to mask the reality that this is actually a marginalized generation, is actually a miseducated generation, is actually a generation that has been at the receiving end of deliberate, systematic processes of depoliticization, demobilization of society. So the state of the consciousness of young people, their social consciousness, their political consciousness, is reflective of the state of the general political and social consciousness of the rest of society.
Yeah, and if you look at that, I mean, a most iconic picture would be that of the Soweto uprisings, and it was young people who brought forward that momentous day, I think, in South Africa's history. And all over the world, if you did look in terms of struggle, just recently, our very recent history, 2015, 2016, 17, with fees must fall, a turning point in the South African landscape has been the youth again. But you raised a very important point when we spoke earlier, and you said that the whole what you call a project, I think in a way, was to depoliticize not only the youth but society per se once we made this turn in 1994. Tell us a little bit more about your vision there.
Yeah, my understanding is that if citizens are co-creators, co-producers of rights, services with the state, business, and so on, then you actually enrich the capacity of citizens to shape society, to be actively involved.
Right.
But if you want to project yourself as a messiah to society, you must say, we are the ones who gave you the freedom. You are the ones who gave you the rights. So the minute the rights are constructed by the establishment, those rights belong to the establishment and not to society. So the project then turned citizens into consumers of rights, consumers of services, rather than creators thereof. A typical example is how former freedom fighters, through the Truth and Reconciliation Commission and so on, were turned into victims and consumers. And you have, for example, the former freedom fighters in Mkondo Wesizwe, Azangla and Apla. They have military veterans associations, but these military veterans associations are not involved in political education programs, in civic education, are not involved in how to mobilize the intelligence they have acquired, the expertise they have acquired to deal, for example, with problems of crime, and many other social ills. But their only preoccupation is how to access benefits from the state. So you have got a very pathetic case where former activists are turned into consumers rather than into people who claim their rights and who construct their rights and who contribute to shaping the agenda of society. So the military veterans only appear when they are asking for benefits and perks. We do not hear their voice and their contributions in critically engaging in general with the issues in society.
So it's almost as if this is a lost generation, isn't it? Because the knowledges, the expertise, the activism, and hopefully, or what you would say, a lot of the knowledge which they gained has just suddenly disappeared, and it's all now sort of couched in material terms, and it's about accessing resources.
Yes. So if there were a civic agency, citizenship, active citizenship, citizenship education, popular education, worker education is on the decline. Obviously, young people, it will also be on the decline because there is an engagement between these different spaces. What happened in one space will have an effect on another space.
It flows into the next space. Now, these ideas, a lot of your ideas, you, as we were speaking before the interview, you explained to me that has come to you and you have learned from the work of Steve Biko and the Black Consciousness Movement. That is where your activism has been. You speak about not being called a liberation hero, because heroes then are those who want some kind of a favor in return or acknowledgement, and that should not be the work of an activist. Basically, when you look back and you think about your first starting point or your first engagement with Biko, what was the most powerful moment for you?
So I accessed Biko through people who have been with him, not directly. So because I joined the Black Consciousness Movement in the 80s, but some of the people who have impacted on me is, for example, Strini Moodley. I had the advantage or the opportunity to attend an adult literacy class that was facilitated by Strini Moodley, where he was initiating us into the Ferrerian pedagogy. And one of the things that he taught us was that the role of a literacy facilitator, and by extension the role of an activist, is to kill himself. In other words, is to create an environment in which your services are no longer required, because you have brought people to a place where they are able to do things for themselves, to think and act for themselves, in order to enhance the individual as well as the collective agency of people. And what he told us was that we need to be aware of the power that we have as a facilitators, so that we can consciously be aware of the potential oppressive impulses in the process of being a facilitator, and so that we are able to identify that as we enter into community organizing, there must be a point of exit, and we have to make people aware of the point of exit and to empower people for the time when we exit. Which is in South Africa, there has been messianic politics,
Yes.
or what I refer to as the politics of the hero.
Right.
The problem with the politics of the hero is that in a patriarchal society, the hero is mostly a male. So many women, for example, the Black Consciousness Movement, the first president of the Black People's Convention is Winnie Modjadji. In other words, Steve Biko was an ordinary member of the first Black consciousness formation. But in South Africa, you ask people about Winnie Modjadji.
Nobody knows.
Nobody knows. It's just Steve Biko is the founding father.
Yes.
The first president of the Azanian People's Organization, which is the organization that followed the Black People's Convention, is a woman. But nobody knows about
her.
About her.
Right. Which is strange because, I mean, even if you look at now the latest cabinet shuffle, an opportunity to bring a woman into that portfolio, that was also just
so
bypassed.
The voice of women disappear. The faces and voices of women disappear. The faces and voices of youth disappear. The faces and voices of the most disenfranchised, marginalized people in society, of the working class, of disabled, disappear because the profile of a hero in this society is an able-bodied, heterosexual male elite.
Yes, it has to be.
So that politics of the hero disempower people. And the other was what I refer to as the mythology of the gun. The idea that most of the songs, the liberation songs, will be uzongena so and so, apete bazooka, so and so will come carrying a bazooka, will come and liberate.
It's a male figure.
People had this idea that there will be some Rambo who will come and liberate them.
Right. And then you don't realize, of course, that the whole idea about contributing towards liberation is eventually to make yourself redundant, where people don't need you anymore because they're all empowered. And that's a very powerful thought on which to start the next conversation. But we have to go to a break. When we come back, we'll take this up a little further. We'll see you after the break.
بمديح الهادي تنتظم ضاءت بالمختار الظلم وحلا في مولده النغم بمديح الهادي تنتظم ضاءت بالمختار الظلم وحلا في مولده النغم.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, and welcome to the second segment today, and finding me on the ITV networks with my very special guest Ibrahim wa Bofelo, and we're talking about Ibrahim's role in terms of youth empowerment, workers' education, and generally the politics of the liberation hero. Ibrahim, you know, you raised a very important point, and that is that each person and every leader, I think for that matter, is what you're trying to say, that comes forward should not consider himself as iconic or as everlasting, but that the purpose and function is to create a better society. Now, is this from much of it, this understanding, so it's from the teachings of Biko, and understanding humanity and a better humanity for all, but the starting point, of course, was for Black people to recognize their own humanity.
Yes.
And in seeing that, you explained to me a little bit about your understanding of racism and the occurrence of racism in South Africa. Perhaps you'd like to elaborate on that.
Yeah, if you look at the roots of racial and class oppression in South Africa, it starts with colonial conquest.
Right.
Right. So, and then look at colonialism itself. Colonialism is the highest stage of capitalism. Capitalism is a system that rely on non-capital factors for its existence. It requires land, it requires labor, it requires society, it requires political stability. Therefore, it requires the state for it to exist. At the very same time, capitalism is a system that does not want those non-capital factors that are responsible for it to thrive, to exist on the same par with capitalism. So it depletes natural resources.
So there's a hierarchy.
Yes, it depletes natural resources. It restricts labor demands, social demands. It restricts the power of the state. right? So capitalism in the Northern Hemisphere, having depleted resources, was in need of extra natural resources, extra cheap labor. So they had to go beyond the boundaries of one country. So in pursuing expansionism, capitalism had to find a moralizing voice or a moral justification for why they take the land of other people. So then they used the doctrine of the superiority and inferiority of specific races as its moralizing voice, that in any case, these are not human beings, these are subhuman beings. These people need us to give them a culture. We are saving them from themselves.
So it's the savior savage metaphor, yes.
So because capital expansionism or colonialism used racism as its moral voice, the social structures that existed in colonial society became structures of racial segregation.
Right.
So in order to acquire cheap labor for itself, when capitalism flourished in South Africa, especially after the discovery of gold and diamond, it utilized pre-existing structures of racial segregation established by colonialism.
Right.
In 1948, the apartheid regime codified legally already existing structures of racism.
Right.
So racism is socially constructed.
So would you take this particular explanation then and use it as a response to the recent comment from Malema about the racism of Indians and Chinese?
When you talk of racism and of Indians and Chinese, you mispresent prejudice within black community broadly defined as racism. And that misses the point that racism is a systemic, structural, and institutional issue that related to when a particular group of people collectively exclude, marginalize others socially, politically, economically, and culturally, and supported by entrenched structures and attitudes.
Right.
So the feelings of racial prejudice within various segments of the black community, whether it's black people of Asian origin or Malay origin or whatever, is not supported by the systemic and structural adjustment.
Yes.
So you cannot refer to ethnic rivalries within the black community as racism. That is to miss the point. Yeah. And also, it is not written in the DNA of people of Asian origin that they will be
superior.
You will see others as inferior. The system of racism used, just like capital used the division of labor to erode, to destroy the social compact that can emanate within the working class.
Yes.
By dividing labor, for example, along gender lines, giving men better jobs, better paying jobs, women lesser jobs. Yes. Apartheid used the very same logic of divide and rule in order to deactivate potentialities for solidarity
between the different groups.
Whatever attitudes that prejudice that happened within the black community did not fall from the sky. There are certain social, political, cultural processes that were put in place, such as, for example, separate development, such as example, displacing the people of Theatas, the people of Marabastad, who were living together as people of Asian origin, indigenous African origin, the Chinese, so-called Chinese, so-called Indians, so-called Coloureds, and African people were all living together. Today I was giving a talk at Marabastad and mentioned the fact that Marabastad is one of the places that suffered dispossession, that suffered displacement of people and separation of people along socially constructed, arbitrarily defined identities. So it's important to say what account for this feeling of suspicion within the black community, within different segments. So to simply call it racism is to fail to understand the social engineering, the social construction that took place in order to demobilize the solidarity of all those who face the reality of being black in the world. The reality is, even the most racist person of Asian origin, when you walk in the street, when a white person see you, you are just another nigger.
That is a very, very powerful explanation, and I think it's missed very often, where you hear in common conversation where people are saying blacks are racist, or you know that now with BEE it's the opposite of what you call it, apartheid. This is now the reverse apartheid, etc. And people miss that point. Yet Biko was very clear about it. It's structural. Racism is structuralism. It's not interpersonal racism, or it's not about how one person treats another person, etc. It's about the power relations, isn't it?
In fact, because the society that we want to create. That's why the motto of the Black Consciousness Movement is one Azania, one nation, one people.
Yes.
He says there shall be no blacks, there shall be no whites, there shall be no majority, there shall be no minority. It will be just people.
Right.
Of course, many liberals end there and don't tell you, Biko says there shall be no blacks, there shall be no minority, white, there will be no minority, when what happens? But he explains it when he says integration shall not be worked for, nor shall it be imposed. It will automatically happen when all doors of prejudice have been closed.
Wow, that's powerful.
In other words, when systemic and structural arrangement that make access to resources, to facilities, to rights and services easier to a certain component of community, of society, whether it is able-bodied people, whether it is women, whether it is white people, whether it is the nationals, and make it inaccessible to a certain group of people, whether it is disabled people, whether it is women, whether it is able, whether it is black people, whether it is immigrants and refugees, and so on.
Right.
So when you do away with any form of prejudice, integration will happen.
It's a natural state.
We will then rehumanize people. So Black consciousness it's about being conscious of the material conditions that make some people superior and inferior, but it is not about making that an eternal reality.
Right.
So a Black consciousness person is able to transcend that reality. So if Black consciousness does not take you to human consciousness, it's no consciousness at all, because then your blackness become a ghetto. And I think
so then you become like an oppressor also, isn't it? Yeah.
Laban Mabasa explains it very clear when he says Black consciousness is about instilling love in black people so that they can radiate that self-love to embrace the rest of humanity with love.
And I think most people miss this point about Biko, that he was actually a humanist.
Yes.
And many who don't understand about Black consciousness either miss this point and think it's being about exclusives.
Yes.
You know, it's exclusionary or particularistic, but it's not. It's about reaching the greater humanity, isn't it?
Yes.
Now, we've almost come to the end, Ibrahim, and I would like you to read one of your poems to us, and perhaps if you can just share some reflections on it. The one that you write on Al-Kawthar, and I think perhaps that would be a powerful moment to leave this on.
Okay, Al-Kawthar. the oasis that springs from me, the fountain within me, the river that cascades into me, the ocean that spreads through me, the river that flows into me, the sea that runs through me, the river that returns to me, the me that springs from you, the fountain within you, the river that cascades into you, the ocean that spreads through you, the river that flows into you, the sea that runs through you, the river that returns to you, the you that springs from me, the me that returns to you, the you in me, the me in you.
Wow, this is very, very powerful, and you're using all metaphors of life and of expressions of life. What was your most powerful thought in writing this? And leave it to us as a parting comment, please.
It's about the interconnectedness of human beings. We come from Allah, we will return to Allah. We should be able to see the attributes of Allah in all human beings, that after all said and done, we are from Nur, and we will return to Nur.
SubhanAllah, and that is a very powerful moment on which to conclude this. I wish you all the best. I hope to see very much more writing, and I hope that you are inspiring the youth to write as well, to take up the power of the pen and to express their creativity, to express their knowledge, and in that also to churn activism again from our youth, because that is what we need. We need a society and young people who are constantly on the push, questioning, arguing, challenging and debating, and I see that that has been a long history in your life. Thank you very much, Ibrahim, for sharing your time and for sharing your thoughts. Fi amanillah, wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
قسما بالله رب العالمين وارتضينا غير دين الله دين فهو دين الحق دين الأنبياء إنه الإسلام نور وضياء.
هذا الدر وهذه الكلم بمديح الهادي تنتظم ضاء